Bound by two alphas married to one, fated to a knot, by Vivienne Storm. Narrated by BookZoro. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what kind of stories you enjoy most. We love hearing from our listeners. Chapter 1. The Arrival. Catalina's POV. The city glittered below the pack tower, a sea of light stretching across the horizon. From the balcony outside the council conference room, Catalina Hale could see traffic flowing in steady streams, humans living ordinary lives, unaware of the world that existed above them. Her world, her responsibility, her prison sometimes. She smoothed a hand over the fitted sleeve of her black dress, the fabric tailored to perfection. Presentation mattered. As Luna of the Silvercrest pack, every appearance carried weight. Every movement was observed, every reaction remembered. Inside the conference room, voices carried faintly through the glass. George's voice among them. Calm, measured, authoritative. Her husband, her chosen mate. George Hale had never intimidated her, not even when he first became alpha. Where other alphas ruled with dominance, George ruled with certainty. He didn't need to raise his voice. The pack listened because they trusted him. And she trusted him. She always had. A notification buzzed lightly against her tablet. Catalina glanced down. Arrival confirmed. Visiting Alpha has entered territory. ETA, 4 minutes. Her chest tightened for a reason she couldn't explain. Not fear, not anticipation, just awareness. Strange. She turned back toward the city lights, exhaling slowly. She had attended dozens of diplomatic meetings beside George. Territorial agreements, trade negotiations, alliance discussions. Nothing about tonight should feel different. Yet her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin. Alert. Watching. Waiting. Cata. She turned at George's voice. He stood in the doorway, tall and composed in a charcoal suit, light hair perfectly in place. His presence always grounded the room. You disappeared, he said gently. Just getting air. He studied her face. He always noticed more than others did. Nervous? No. A small smile touched his mouth. Good. The Northern Ridge Alpha has a reputation for being difficult. She lifted an eyebrow. We've handled worse. Yes, he agreed, stepping closer. We have. His hand brushed hers briefly, a small gesture no one else would notice. Comfort, familiarity, partnership, home. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Both of them turned. The conference doors opened, and the moment the visiting Alpha entered, Catalina's world shifted. He didn't look dangerous. He looked controlled. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that scanned the room with calculating calm. He moved like someone accustomed to command, not forcefully, but inevitably, like a storm contained inside a suit. George stepped forward immediately to greet him, confident and welcoming. Alpha Hale, the man said smoothly, shaking his hand. Thank you for receiving us. Alpha Volkov, welcome to Silvercrest. Then George turned slightly. Cata. She walked forward automatically, every step measured, graceful, composed, exactly as a Luna should. But the moment she reached him, the man looked at her, and the world narrowed. A strange recognition hit her. Not emotion, not attraction. Something deeper. Something instinctive. Something her wolf understood instantly. Her breath caught. He felt it too. His eyes sharpened, not surprised, aware. Her hand extended politely with the welcome folder. On behalf of our pack, welcome. Their fingers brushed. The bond snapped into existence. Not warmth, not romance. Recognition. Ancient. Inevitable. Her wolf surged forward inside her mind. Mate. Chapter 2. The Merger. Peter's POV. The moment their hands touched, Peter knew. He didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't stare. But inside, something ancient snapped into place. Mate. His wolf surged forward with a force he hadn't felt since his first shift. Recognition burned through him. Not desire, not impulse. Certainty. And she was already married. He had known Alpha Hale was mated. The file had been clear. Stable leadership, bonded pair, strong pack unity. None of that mattered to instinct. His gaze met hers only briefly before he stepped back, allowing space, respect, control. Control was something he had learned early. "You've built an impressive territory," Peter said smoothly, redirecting attention back to business. George Hale watched him carefully. Observant alpha. Sharp. "Silvercrest has always believed in modernization," George replied. "Progress strengthens survival." Peter inclined his head. "Northern Ridge agrees." That wasn't entirely true. Northern Ridge survived on dominance and legacy, not adaptation. But that was exactly why Peter was here. Officially, this visit was about a corporate merger. Shared shipping routes, land contracts, energy infrastructure. Unofficially, Peter was assessing whether Silvercrest was strong enough to survive what was coming. Because something was shifting across the territories. Rogue movement had increased. Alliance talks were becoming defensive rather than cooperative. And now, fate had tied him to another Alpha's Luna. Convenient, cruel, strategic. His wolf paced restlessly. "She is ours." No. He shut the thought down instantly. "She is mated." The conference room felt smaller than it had seconds ago. He forced his attention back to the discussion screens as financial projections appeared. Catalina stood beside George. Composed, but he could feel it. The thin thread pulling between them. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. Her scent had changed when she realized. Shock, control, steel. Interesting. She was stronger than most Lunas he had met. George continued outlining partnership terms, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of what had just altered the atmosphere. Peter wondered how long before the Alpha sensed it fully. Mate bonds were not subtle. Even suppressed ones hummed beneath the skin. The meeting progressed smoothly on the surface. Projected profits, shared patrol technology, border monitoring upgrades. Yet Peter felt like he was negotiating for something far more personal than land or money. This merger was not about packs. It was about survival. And now, somehow, it was about her. He allowed himself one more glance at Catalina. She did not look at him. But her wolf did. He could feel it. Aware, alert, resisting, good. He preferred strength to surrender. The meeting adjourned with polite handshakes and formal smiles. "Dinner is prepared," George announced. "We can continue informal discussion there." Peter nodded. "I look forward to it." But as they exited the conference room, his wolf spoke again. "You came for a merger. You found your mate." He kept his expression neutral. Yes. And nothing in his life had ever been simple. Not before, and certainly not now. Chapter 3. Cracks in Control. Catalina's POV. Dinner was a performance. Crystal glasses. Controlled smiles. Strategic conversation. Silvercrest prided itself on refinement. The dining hall overlooked the city skyline. Candlelight reflecting against floor-to-ceiling glass. Every detail had been curated to project stability, strength, unity. Catalina sat beside George at the head of the table. Across from her, Peter Volkov. She refused to look at him directly. Refused to acknowledge the pull threading between them. Mate. The word still echoed in her mind like a betrayal. She had chosen George. She had stood before her pack and accepted him as alpha. Accepted him as partner. Built a life with him brick by brick. Fate did not get to rewrite that. "You've expanded quickly in the last 5 years," Peter remarked. swirling his wine but not drinking it. George nodded. Adaptation is necessary. For some, Peter agreed evenly. There was something layered beneath his tone. Not hostile. Testing. Catalina's wolf paced restlessly. He feels it. Of course he felt it. The bond was a live wire between them, humming beneath skin and silk and diplomacy. She focused on her breathing. In, out, control. How long do you intend to remain in the city? She asked calmly, finally meeting Peter's gaze. There. That awareness again. His eyes darkened almost imperceptibly. As long as negotiations require. Not helpful. George's hand rested lightly against her knee beneath the table. Familiar. Grounding. Possessive. Her wolf reacted instantly. Not in rejection. In confusion. Because the bond pulling her forward was not something she had invited. Yet it existed all the same. You'll find 𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕, George said smoothly. We value long-term stability. Peter's gaze flicked briefly to George's hand, then back to Catalina. Stability, he repeated. A quiet challenge. She straightened slightly. We do not fracture under pressure, she said. His expression shifted. Approval? Interest? Good, he replied softly. Neither do we. The temperature at the table felt warmer than it should. Other council members continued polite discussion about trade and territory, unaware of the silent war unfolding between instinct and loyalty. Catalina forced herself to eat, though she tasted nothing. Mate bonds were supposed to be blessings, sacred, celebrated, not complications. What cruel version of fate bound a Luna to another alpha? Her wolf whispered again. Power. She ignored it. When dinner ended, George rose first. Peter, I'll have guest quarters prepared in the East Wing. Peter stood as well, appreciated. Catalina did not miss the way his posture shifted when George stepped away momentarily to speak with a council member. The air changed instantly. Quieter, thicker. You're fighting it, Peter said quietly, voice low enough that no one else could hear. Her pulse spiked. I am married, she replied evenly. Yes. No apology, no retreat. His gaze did not waver. You felt it. It wasn't a question. She held his stare. I felt something. A lie. Small. Necessary. His wolf brushed against hers. Not physically, but energetically. A presence. A pressure at the edge of her mind. Her control cracked for half a second. Careful, she warned. A flicker of something dangerous lit his eyes. Always. George returned then, unaware of the undercurrent. Everything arranged, he said warmly. Catalina rose, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress. Composed again. Perfect Luna. But as they walked from the dining hall, she knew something irreversible had begun. Not an affair, not betrayal, something deeper. The kind of shift that rewrote alliances. And she had no idea whether she was strong enough to withstand it. Chapter 4. Fracture Lines. Peter's POV. Peter did not linger in the East Wing. The moment the Hale Pack's staff left him alone, he stepped onto the private balcony attached to his guest suite and drew in a slow breath. Silvercrest's skyline glittered beneath him. Controlled. Polished. Carefully curated strength. He respected that. He also recognized pressure when he felt it. And tonight, pressure had a pulse. Mate. The word was no longer a distant echo. It was a living current beneath his skin. At dinner, he had maintained composure. Measured tone, neutral posture, diplomatic responses. But the second George Hale's hand had settled on Catalina's knee beneath the table, his wolf had surged. Not in jealousy. In recognition. Mine. Peter exhaled slowly through his nose, gripping the balcony railing until the metal creaked faintly under his fingers. Dangerous. This was dangerous. He had negotiated territorial wars with less volatility than what sat 3 floors above him in the Hale private residence. He should leave. That was the logical choice. Distance weakened the bond's edge. Proximity sharpened it. And tonight, it had sharpened. A knock sounded softly at the suite door. Enter, he said without turning. Victor stepped inside, already reading the tension in the room. It's confirmed, his beta said. The Hale Council wants extended negotiation sessions tomorrow. They're accelerating the merger timeline. Of course they were. Peter gave a short nod. They feel instability. Victor's gaze sharpened. From us? From her. Silence. Victor crossed his arms. Does Hale know? Peter considered that carefully. George Hale was observant, strategic, the kind of alpha who watched the room instead of dominating it. He suspects something, Peter said. He doesn't know what. Do you? The question lingered. Peter looked back out over the city. Yes, he knew. This was not attraction, not curiosity, not temptation. This was the old magic, the binding kind, the kind that did not consult politics before it chose. She is loyal, Peter said quietly. Good, Victor replied. Yes, because loyalty meant resistance, and resistance meant control. But when Catalina had looked at him across the candlelight, control had cracked. He had seen it, felt it. Her wolf had reached back, not surrendering, not inviting, acknowledging. And that acknowledgement had settled something ancient inside him. Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. We can leave at dawn. Peter's jaw tightened. Leaving would be the responsible decision. Clean, strategic, safe. But something inside him resisted the idea with unexpected force. He wasn't afraid of George Hale. He wasn't afraid of scandal. He was afraid of what would happen if he walked away without understanding what this bond meant. If fate had tied their packs together through something deeper than contracts. Leaving might not prevent damage. It might cause it. Peter straightened. No, he said finally. Victor studied him carefully. No, we stay. On what grounds? Peter's gaze hardened slightly. Clarity. Because if this bond existed, it would surface eventually. Better to face it directly than allow it to grow in shadows. Miles away, above him, the thread pulsed again. Sharp, awake. She wasn't sleeping. His wolf went still. She feels it. Peter closed his eyes briefly. This was no longer a simple merger. This was leverage fate had placed directly between two alphas. And Peter Volkov did not ignore leverage. Not even when it threatened to unravel everything. Chapter 5. Tension and Convergence. Catalina's POV. She knew before the sun rose. The thread had not weakened. It had strengthened. Catalina stood at the bedroom window again, watching dawn bleed into the skyline. Her wolf was no longer restless. It was aware. He didn't leave. The certainty settled deep in her bones. Behind her, George adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror. They requested expanded negotiations this morning, he said calmly. Her pulse skipped. They're staying? Yes. One word. Measured. She turned slowly. You expected them to go? George's gaze met hers in the reflection. I expected Volkov to avoid unnecessary complications. The word hung between them. Complications. Her wolf bristled faintly. George faced her fully now. You felt it too. Not a question. Catalina lifted her chin. Yes. Silence. Then, good, George said quietly. That unsettled her more than anger would have. George's POV, Peter Volkov, did not waste time with pleasantries. He entered the private conference room precisely on schedule. No beta, no advisors, respect, or confidence. George remained seated at the head of the table. Alpha Hale, Peter acknowledged. Volkov. The air in the room was controlled. Too controlled. You were preparing to leave, George said without preamble. Peter didn't blink. I reconsidered. Why? A beat. Because departure would not resolve the issue. George studied him carefully. So he does name it. What issue? George asked evenly. Peter's gaze sharpened slightly. You know. The room went very still. George leaned back slightly in his chair. My Luna is loyal. I know. That answer came too fast. Too certain. George's jaw flexed. And you? He asked quietly. Peter did not look away. I do not take what is not freely given. Power met power. No raised voices, no overt threats, but the challenge was clear. George stood slowly. This merger, he said, is necessary. For both packs. Yes. George stepped closer. If your presence destabilizes my territory. It won't, Peter cut in calmly. A flicker of dominance sparked in the room. George allowed it. Measured it. You will not pursue her, George said. Peter held his gaze. I will not dishonor her. Carefully worded. George noticed. So did Peter. Before either could speak further, the conference room doors opened abruptly. A council member entered. Pale. Alpha, there's a situation at the Southern Trade District. George's attention snapped toward him. What kind of situation? Rogue activity. Not ours. Peter stiffened slightly. How many? He asked. Unknown. They're targeting transport lines. Transport lines. Shared routes. Shared assets. Shared leverage. George and Peter looked at each other at the same time. This wasn't coincidence. It was pressure. And pressure exposed fractures. George turned sharply. Mobilize internal security. Lock down the district. Peter stepped forward. My men are already stationed near the border. We can reinforce. A tense pause. Allowing another Alpha's forces into city limits required trust. Or necessity. George made the calculation quickly. Fine, he said. But they report to me while inside Silvercrest. Peter gave a single nod. Understood. Catalina's POV. She felt it before the alert reached her phone. Violence. Not near her, but near the edges of their shared territory. Her wolf surged forward instantly. Protection. Defense. She moved toward the command wing without hesitation. When she entered the operations floor, they were already there. George on one side of the tactical table, Peter on the other. Maps illuminated between them. Troop positions shifting in real time. They looked like opposing forces. They moved like allies. And the bond between her and Peter pulsed violently in the charged atmosphere of potential war. Both Alphas felt her arrival. Both turned at the same time. For a split second, the power in the room aligned. Not fractured, not divided, aligned. Her wolf went still, because suddenly it understood what hers had whispered at dinner. Power. Not temptation, not betrayal. Power. If fate had tied her to a second Alpha, it might not be to break Silvercrest. It might be to fortify it. But that kind of strength required balance, and balance required trust. The rogue attack outside the Southern District intensified. Alarms pulsed. George issued orders. Peter adjusted strategy. Catalina stepped forward. Stop treating me like a variable, she said calmly. Both men went quiet. She placed her hand on the illuminated map between them. We respond together. Not Hale. Not Volkov. Together. Silence. Then, George gave a slow nod. Peter followed. And somewhere deep beneath politics and territory and instinct, the bond settled. Not resolved, not claimed, but acknowledged. The real fracture had not happened yet. But now all three of them were standing on the same fault line. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 6. Declaration. The private discussion. The estate had gone quiet. Security rotations doubled. Perimeter reinforced. Council members dismissed until morning. Only the three of them remained in the Luna sitting room. Warm amber lighting. Velvet and leather. City lights beyond glass. George stood near the fireplace. Peter near the far window. Catalina between them. No one spoke first. Because this was not about rogues anymore. It was about truth. Peter broke the silence. The attack was coordinated. Yes, George replied. And whoever orchestrated it expected division. Catalina's voice was steady. They expected you to distrust each other. A pause. Peter looked at her fully now. And do you? The question wasn't about territory. It wasn't about strategy. It was about the bond. She didn't hesitate. No. George's gaze shifted to her. You accept it, he said quietly. Not disbelief. Confirmation. Catalina inhaled slowly. I tried to frame it as instinct misfiring, proximity, stress. She stepped closer to them both. But my wolf does not misfire. Silence deepened. Peter's jaw flexed. George's shoulders straightened. This bond is not temptation, Catalina continued. It is structural. The word hung in the room. Structural. George absorbed that carefully. Peter's eyes darkened. Not with hunger, with gravity. If this is real, George said slowly, then it changes more than us. It changes succession, Peter added. It changes pack law, George finished. It changes perception, Catalina said. And there it was, the weight of it. The betas enter a knock at the door. Nyla entered first, Victor behind her, Mateo last. No ceremony, no pretense. They could feel it already. Something shifted, Nyla said bluntly. George didn't deny it. Catalina stepped forward. There is a bond between myself and Alpha Volkov. Mateo's breath caught slightly. Victor went very still. Nyla's gaze sharpened. And? Victor asked evenly. And I am not rejecting it, Catalina said. Silence. Heavy. Mateo looked to George. You're accepting this? George held his beta's gaze. I am acknowledging reality. Nyla crossed her arms. This will fracture weaker wolves, she said plainly. They won't understand. Peter finally stepped forward. Then we explain it. Victor studied him. You're willing to subordinate your claim? He asked carefully. Peter didn't flinch. There is no claim, he said. There is alignment. That word mattered. George noticed. So did Catalina. Council assembly. By dawn, both councils were convened in the estate's main chamber. Silvercrest elders on one side, Northern Ridge Council on the other. Tension coiled beneath formal posture. George stood first. Last night's rogue attack confirmed what we suspected, he said. Our territories are being tested. Peter stepped forward seamlessly. Division will invite further aggression. Eyes shifted between them. Catalina moved to stand between the two alphas. Not behind, not beside, between. There is a bond between us, she said clearly. Murmurs rippled instantly. Not outrage. Shock. It is not coercion, she continued. It is not betrayal. It is not instability. She let silence settle before continuing. It is strength. An elder from Silvercrest rose. Dual alpha bonds destabilize hierarchy. No, Peter said calmly. They redefine it. A Northern Ridge councilman spoke next. And succession? George answered this time. Succession will follow blood and strength, not insecurity. The chamber went very quiet. Helena, George's mother, watched without interruption. Adrian Volkov's gaze was calculating. Victor and Nyla stood flanking the chamber walls. Guardians, witnesses. Catalina stepped forward one final pace. This is not indulgence, she said. It is strategy. Our enemies are evolving. So must we. The room stilled. Elders whispered quietly among themselves. Long minutes passed. Then Helena stood. Her voice cut through the chamber with calm authority. Silvercrest recognizes the Luna's bond. A beat. Adrian Volkov inclined his head slightly. Northern Ridge acknowledges it. The ripple that followed wasn't applause. It was adjustment. History bending. The announcement. By afternoon, the full pack assembled in the courtyard. Wolves in tailored black. Gammas on perimeter. Betas at the flanks. George stepped forward first. Silvercrest and Northern Ridge are no longer negotiating alliance. Peter followed. We are forging legacy. Catalina moved between them. The triad bond has been recognized by both councils. Shock rolled through the ranks. But not rebellion. Not yet. A formal ceremony will take place, George continued. In 3 weeks' time. Peter's voice carried evenly. At that ceremony, the packs will be bound officially under shared leadership. Catalina finished. This is not division. This is expansion. Silence. Then, one by one, heads bowed, not forced, but understanding the inevitability. The date was set. The world shifted. Chapter 7. Aftermath. Private. The estate was quieter than it had been in weeks. Not peaceful, just aware. The announcement had gone through the pack like controlled lightning, contained, directed, but impossible to ignore. Catalina stood in the Luna sitting room, barefoot on the layered rug, staring at the city lights beyond the glass. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until ceremony. 3 weeks until history became law. Behind her, the door opened. George entered first. He had dismissed the last of the council members personally. He still wore his tailored jacket, though his shoulders were tighter than usual. Peter followed moments later, having just completed a secure call with Northern Ridge Command. No one spoke at first, because this wasn't strategy. This was adjustment. George poured whiskey into 3 glasses this time. That was new. He handed one to Peter, then one to Catalina. "We moved faster than I intended," George said quietly. Catalina looked at him. "You regret it?" "No." His answer was immediate. "But I feel the cost." Peter watched him carefully. "Silvercrest is unsettled. So is Northern Ridge," Peter added before George could respond. "Several elders believe I'm diluting our authority." George's jaw flexed. "Are you?" Peter held his gaze. "No." The air shifted slightly. Catalina stepped closer to them both. "You're not losing power," she said softly to George. His eyes flicked to her. "I'm sharing it. That's not the same as losing." For a moment, something vulnerable surfaced in his expression. Gone almost instantly. "I built this territory with singular command," he said. "I know how to protect it alone." Peter answered before he could stop himself. "You won't be alone anymore." The words hung heavier than intended. George turned slowly toward him. "Be careful with assurances you can't control." It wasn't a threat. It was truth. Peter didn't retreat. "I don't give assurances lightly." The tension wasn't romantic. It wasn't jealousy. It was identity. Catalina felt the bond pull tight between them, not to fuse them, but to test them. She set her glass down deliberately. "Then we build new control," she said. "Not over each other. With each other." Silence. George studied her. Peter exhaled slowly. No resolution. But something steadier than before. Not harmony. Alignment in progress. 2. The reaction. 2 nights later. Southern Trade District. Midnight. A warehouse owned under a Silvercrest shell company went dark. Not a power failure. A breach. Masked signatures. Signal scrambling. Again. But this time nothing was stolen. Something was planted. Rami D'Souza traced it first from the Northern Ridge servers. "Encrypted device," he said through secure line. "Minimal output. Broadcasting intermittently." "To where?" Victor asked. "Unknown. It's bouncing signals." George stood over the tactical table in the operations wing when the device was brought in. Small, black, deliberate. Peter examined it without touching. "This isn't rogue work," he said quietly. "No," George agreed. Catalina stepped closer. Her wolf was still, focused. "They want us visible," she said. Mateo looked up sharply. "Visible how?" Peter's eyes lifted to meet hers. "If this device captures abnormal energy spikes during the ceremony, they expose us," Nyla finished. Silence crashed over the room. Not to humanity at large, but to someone informed enough to look. Someone testing technology against myth. George's expression hardened. "This isn't random aggression." Peter nodded once. "It's reconnaissance." Catalina's pulse slowed instead of quickened, because now it made sense. The rogue attacks, the coordinated pressure, the planted surveillance. Someone knew convergence was happening, and someone wanted proof. "Accelerate internal tech sweeps," George ordered. "Already in motion," Victor replied. Peter looked at George then, not as rival, as equal threat assessment. They're escalating because we escalated first. George met his gaze. Then we escalate smarter. 3. The quiet shift. Later that night, Catalina stood alone on the terrace, wind lifting her hair. City humming beyond walls. Peter stepped out first this time, not George. He stopped a respectful distance away. I didn't anticipate external exposure this quickly, he said quietly. You anticipated internal resistance, she replied. Yes. He hesitated. I won't destabilize him. She looked at him fully now. You're not the destabilizing force. He held her gaze a second too long. That depends on perspective. Before she could respond, the terrace door opened again. George stepped out. He took in the distance between them. The tension, the restraint. He didn't comment. Instead, he moved to stand beside Catalina. Peter mirrored the position on her other side. 3 figures overlooking the city, not touching, but undeniably connected. Below them, unseen and somewhere in the dark industrial district, another encrypted signal blinked to life. The world was no longer just reacting to their bond, it was studying it. Chapter 8. Slow Burn. The leak. The leak wasn't dramatic. No alarms, no explosions. Just data. Helena Volkov noticed it first. She didn't accuse anyone immediately. She never did. But Silvercrest's internal server logs showed external pings, small data packets leaving at odd hours. Harmless, individually. But patterned. Council meeting summaries, ceremony logistics, security adjustments. Someone inside was feeding information out. She brought it to George privately. This isn't random infiltration, she said evenly, sliding a tablet across his desk. George scanned the logs. The timestamps made his jaw tighten. Who has access to these files? Council and Senior Command. That narrowed the circle dangerously. Do not confront them yet, Helena added. Let them feel unseen. George nodded slowly. If someone inside feared the triad enough to leak, then the fracture wasn't theoretical anymore. It was personal. The poll later that evening, Catalina stood in the strategy wing reviewing ceremony perimeter maps. Peter entered quietly. You're avoiding the sitting room, he observed. She didn't look up. I'm thinking. About? She finally turned. You. He didn't pretend confusion. That's unwise, he said calmly. Her wolf stirred, not aggressive. Curious. You stayed, she said. Even knowing this complicates everything. Yes. Why? A beat. Because leaving would have been easier, he said honestly. And I don't choose easier. The air shifted. There was no performance between them. No seduction. Just truth. You feel it more now, she said quietly. Yes. No hesitation. The honesty was disarming. He stepped closer, not invading, not claiming, but the distance shortened. The bond strengthens under pressure, he said, and we are under considerable pressure. Her breath slowed instead of quickened. George knows. I know. And? Peter's jaw tightened slightly. And I will not move against him. Not I won't move toward you. Important distinction. She noticed. He noticed. She noticed. The silence thickened. She closed the final step between them. Their hands didn't touch, but they were close enough to feel heat. This wasn't lust. It was inevitability tightening. Peter exhaled slowly. You should step back. Do you want me to? The question wasn't coy. It was direct. His control flickered for a fraction of a second. No. That one word landed between them like a spark. She reached up, just enough to brush her fingers against his collar, adjusting it unnecessarily. A harmless gesture. Except it wasn't. His hand came up instinctively, not to pull her in, to steady her wrist. The contact was brief, electric. Both of them went very still. The bond surged sharply, not violent, but undeniable. Footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor. They stepped apart instantly. Control restored. But something had shifted. 3. George. George saw it. Not the touch, not the moment, but the change. Catalina was quieter that night. Peter more restrained than usual. And the bond, the invisible current he felt through her, was warmer on one side. He stood alone in his study later, lights dimmed. He had built 𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕 with singular authority. He understood competition. But this wasn't competition. This was evolution. He could fight the bond, or he could shape it. The choice was strategic and personal. There was a knock. Matteo entered without ceremony. "You've felt it," his beta said quietly. "Yes. You okay with that?" George didn't answer immediately. Finally, "I don't intend to lose my Luna." Matteo held his gaze. "And?" George's voice was steady. "Which means I need to build something that isn't just tradition." Matteo's brows lifted slightly. "You're adapting. I'm leading." There was a difference. And they both knew it. IV, the source elsewhere. Inside 𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕's inner council wing, Elder Marcus Vale stared at the encrypted messaging device in his hand. He did not see himself as a traitor. He saw himself as a protector of tradition. One Luna, one Alpha, one line. This triad weakened clarity. Weakened law. He pressed send. Ceremony logistics transmitted. He believed exposure would force correction. He didn't know who exactly he was sending the information to, only that they promised oversight. And oversight felt safer than change. The shift. Later that night, Catalina lay awake. George beside her. Steady, grounded, present. The bond pulsed faintly, like a second heartbeat. She turned toward him. He was not asleep. "You're recalculating," she said softly. "Yes. You're not angry." "No." That almost hurt more. He brushed his thumb gently across her knuckles. "I will not compete for you," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "But I will not disappear either. Strength, not possessiveness." She leaned closer to him. "You won't." Across the estate, Peter stood alone on the northern terrace, watching the same skyline. The bond pulsed once more. Stronger. Closer. And 3 weeks suddenly felt very short. Chapter 9. Crossing Lines. The pattern. Helena did not accuse. She observed. By the third data irregularity, she no longer doubted intent. She requested access logs from the inner council chamber without raising alarm. George stood beside her in the dim light of the study, reviewing timestamps. "Same access node each time," Helena murmured. "Manual override." George's jaw hardened. "Who?" Helena expanded the user credentials. "Elder Marcus Vale. A respected traditionalist. Vocal, but never reckless. Until now." George exhaled slowly. "He believes he's protecting the pack, which makes him more dangerous." Helena replied evenly. "Do we confront him?" "No." Helena said at once. "We follow the thread." George's gaze sharpened. "Find out who he's feeding." "Yes." "Let the leak lead them outward." 2. The weight of restraint Catalina had been avoiding the northern terrace. Tonight, she didn't. Peter stood at the edge of the stone railing, jacket off, sleeves rolled slightly. He didn't turn when she approached. "I was beginning to think you'd decided against this," he said quietly. "I don't make decisions out of fear." He finally looked at her. Good. The air between them wasn't tense anymore. It was charged. "You feel it escalating," she said. "Yes." "And you're still staying." "Yes." A pause. "You could leave before this crosses a line," she said. He stepped closer. "It crossed a line the moment we acknowledged it." There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty. She felt the bond hum sharply, stronger than it ever had before. "You're not subtle," she murmured. "I'm disciplined," he corrected. Her breath hitched faintly. He was close enough now that warmth radiated between them. "You don't discipline this," she said. His control slipped for half a heartbeat. "No." The admission was quiet. Dangerous. She reached for him first. Not impulsive. Intentional. Her fingers slid against his collar again, but this time she didn't pretend it was adjustment. His hand came to her waist instinctively, firm, steady, not claiming, but anchoring. The contact ignited the bond. Sharp, hot, unmistakable. He lowered his forehead briefly to hers. One breath shared. "If we do this," he said low, "it changes everything." It already has. The kiss wasn't frantic. It wasn't stolen. It was slow, measured, and devastatingly certain. The bond snapped tighter, not complete, not sealed, but awakened fully. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing differently, not out of control, but altered. Peter stepped back first, not retreating, choosing. "This cannot undermine him," he said quietly. "It won't," she replied, but even she wasn't sure what that meant anymore. 3. The Watcher. Across the estate courtyard, a security camera pivoted silently. Normal sweep, normal function, except the internal routing had been modified. Miles away, in a rented office overlooking the industrial district, a monitor flickered. Grainy image, stone terrace. 2 figures too close. The footage wasn't clear enough to identify faces, but it was clear enough to confirm proximity. A man leaned back in his chair. "So it's true," he murmured. He didn't care about romance. He cared about leverage. IV. George felt it before he saw her. The shift. The warmth in the bond that was not centered on him. He was in the strategy wing when Catalina entered minutes later. Her composure was intact, but something in her eyes had softened, deepened. Peter entered shortly after. Calm, controlled, almost too controlled. George didn't look between them. He didn't need to. The air told him, the bond told him. It had crossed. He dismissed the staff quietly. When the room emptied, he spoke without accusation. "You've moved forward." Not a question. Catalina held his gaze. Yes. The honesty landed clean. Peter did not speak. George looked at him then. A long, measured look. "You understand what that means," George said. "Yes," Peter replied evenly. "And you will not destabilize this pack." "I won't." The room was still. George's chest tightened. Not with jealousy, with recalibration. He had known this moment would come. Knowing didn't soften it. But it clarified him. He stepped closer to Catalina. Not possessive. Present. "This strengthens us," he said quietly. "Or it breaks us." "It strengthens," she answered. He studied her a moment longer. Then he nodded. "Not surrender. Not defeat. Decision." "Then we move forward deliberately," he said. Peter inclined his head slightly. Agreement. But outside the estate walls, the man watching the grainy footage smiled faintly. The ceremony date was set. The bond had escalated, and now there was proof. Chapter 10. Exposure. Following the thread, Marcus Vale never suspected he was being watched. He believed himself cautious. Encrypted device, dead drop-style communication. No direct replies. But he underestimated Helena, and he underestimated Victor. Rami traced the outgoing data packets through layered reroutes, false IP addresses, commercial masking networks, until finally, a pattern. "Signal terminates in Johannesburg Industrial Grid," Rami reported quietly in the strategy wing. "Registered to a research consultancy." "Name?" George asked. Rami hesitated. "Helix Dynamics." Peter went very still. "That's not a consultancy," he said. Nyla looked up sharply. "What is it?" "A private research group," Peter answered. "Publicly focused on biological anomaly tracking." Silence fell. Catalina's wolf rose instantly. "They hunt what they can't explain," she said. "Yes," Peter confirmed. "And they're very well funded." George's jaw hardened. "They know." "Not everything," Victor corrected, "but enough to investigate." Marcus hadn't been feeding tradition protectors. He'd been feeding hunters. 2. I'll leave. The message. The blackmail came 48 hours later. Not dramatic, not theatrical. An encrypted file delivered directly to Silvercrest's secure server. Inside, grainy footage, the northern terrace. 2 figures too close. 1 kiss. Not explicit, but unmistakable. And beneath the video, a single line. Public exposure destabilizes markets. Let's negotiate. George watched the footage once, then shut the screen off. Peter's expression didn't change. Catalina didn't flinch. Leverage, Peter said calmly. They think scandal weakens us, George replied. They don't understand pack structure, Nyla muttered. No, Helena said quietly from the doorway. They understand human structure. Public scandal, corporate fallout, political scrutiny. That was the angle. George looked at Peter. You said they're well-funded. They are. Then they want control. Peter nodded once. Yes. Catalina stepped forward. They think the bond is a vulnerability. Her wolf rose fully now, not afraid, defiant. Then we show them it's not. 3. The deliberate choice. That night, George sought Catalina first. Not out of panic, not out of ownership. Out of intention. She was in the private library, ceremony documents spread across the table. He closed the door quietly behind him. They sent the footage to you? She asked. Yes. And? George walked toward her slowly. And I'm not angry. That caught her off guard. You should be, she said softly. No. He stopped in front of her. I expected this moment. I did not expect to feel steadier. Her breath slowed. Steadier? If this is the structure forming, he said, voice low but controlled, then I will not resist it out of pride. He reached for her hand deliberately. No rush. No heat. Grounded. You are my Luna, he said quietly. Not because of tradition, because of choice. Her chest tightened. I choose you, she answered without hesitation. And I choose this, he said, meaning all of it. The bond between them settled into something deeper. Not territorial, not defensive, intentional intimacy. He brushed his thumb along her jaw gently. Not possessive, present. The kiss that followed wasn't urgent. It was anchoring, a reminder, a foundation, not competition, strength, IV, the countermove. Meanwhile, in the strategy wing, Peter stood alone with Victor. They're escalating quickly, Victor said. Yes, you anticipated scrutiny, not blackmail. Peter's jaw flexed slightly. No. Victor studied him. And the bond? Peter didn't look away. It complicates perception. Victor's gaze sharpened. Or strengthens unity. Peter exhaled slowly. If we respond publicly before they can weaponize it, we remove leverage. Accelerate the ceremony? Victor asked. Peter considered. No. He looked toward the terrace. We control timing, not them. V. The realization. Helena entered the strategy wing minutes later. Marcus has gone silent, she said. George's voice came through the speaker system from the library. Because he realizes what he's done. Or because Helix has him, Peter said quietly. The room went still. If Helix was willing to blackmail Alpha leadership, they were willing to eliminate liabilities. Catalina entered moments later, composed but resolute. They want fracture, she said. George stepped beside her. Peter mirrored on her other side. 3 leaders, 1 fault line. Then we give them none, George said. Peter nodded. And we hunt the hunters. Outside the estate, Helix Dynamics adjusted surveillance protocols. They had proof of convergence, proof of emotional entanglement, proof of leverage. What they didn't understand was that they had just accelerated something far more dangerous than scandal. They had unified 3 alphas against a common enemy. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 11. Controlled Fire. Public Optics, Silvercrest Holdings executive boardroom sat 30 floors above the city. Glass walls, city skyline. Human executives who believed they ran empires. Catalina stood at the head of the table. Not Luna, CEO. George sat to her right, Peter to her left. The optics were intentional. The board had received the anonymous footage 12 hours earlier. Whispers had already started. Is this a liability issue? One director asked cautiously. Does this signal instability between leadership structures? Catalina didn't sit. She didn't deflect. Yes, she said calmly. The room stilled. Then she continued. Yes, there is a strategic personal alliance forming between our leadership structures. The directors blinked. Strategic, not scandal. Silvercrest and Northern Ridge are consolidating infrastructure, transport, and political influence, she continued smoothly. Leadership alignment reflects that consolidation. She let the implications settle. This wasn't romance. This was merger politics, George added evenly. Internal cohesion strengthens market stability, Peter finished. If there were instability, we wouldn't be standing here together. Silence. Measured. Catalina stepped forward. Attempted blackmail has been identified. We are handling it internally. No exposure will occur. Not hopefully. Will. Confidence is contagion. The board members exchanged glances. No one challenged her. Because strength presented without apology rarely is. When the meeting adjourned, the directors left reassured. Not because they understood everything, but because they understood power when they saw it. 2. After the board. In the private elevator down, silence stretched between the three of them. Then George exhaled faintly. You handled that perfectly. I told the truth, Catalina replied. Peter glanced at her. You reframed the truth. She met his gaze. That's leadership. For the first time in days, something like satisfaction moved through the bond. Not tension, synchronization. 3. The strike helix dynamics occupied a low-profile building in the industrial district. Unmarked. Clean. Corporate. Too clean. Victor stood over the operational layout in the estate's lower command room. Private security on rotation. Data servers on sublevel 2. We don't destroy, George said. We extract. Data? Nyla asked. Evidence, Peter corrected. Catalina studied the blueprint. They think we're myth, she said quietly. They need to understand we are infrastructure. George looked at her. You're not coming. Her gaze sharpened. I'm not asking. Silence. Peter stepped in before dominance flared. She stays central command, he said evenly. If something shifts, we need her vantage. That was not exclusion. It was strategic necessity. Catalina nodded once. Bring me their internal communications. The infiltration. It wasn't loud. No alarms. No shattered glass. Victor and Nyla moved first through the exterior security blind spots. Mateo coordinated transport suppression from 2 blocks away. Peter and George entered together. No rivalry. No hesitation. Just precision. Sublevel 2. Server racks humming quietly. Rami's voice in their comms. Downloading now. You've got 3 minutes before their anomaly detection flags irregular traffic. Peter scanned the room. They've been tracking energy fluctuations for months. George's expression darkened. Not just us. No, Peter agreed. Others. They weren't the only pack under scrutiny. Extraction complete, Rami confirmed. Plant it, George said. Peter pulled a small device from his pocket. Reverse surveillance implant. Let Helix believe their monitoring was intact. Let them keep talking. Controlled fire. They exited without detection. But as they reached the exterior perimeter, a lone Helix security officer turned the corner unexpectedly. Too close. Too aware. The man froze. He didn't see wolves. He saw 2 powerful men where none should be. Peter moved first. Controlled. Fast. Disarming him without lethal force. George restrained. The man slumped unconscious. Breathing steady. Minimal footprint, Peter said. Agreed. They vanished into the night. IV. The revelation. Back at the estate, Catalina stood at central command when the data decrypted. Rami's screen filled with internal Helix communications. Project name Cerberus. Objective. Confirm existence of multi-alpha bonding structure. Acquire biological sample if possible. The room went silent. Nyla swore softly. They're not just observing, she said. They're preparing capture. Victor finished. Catalina's wolf rose, calm and lethal. George and Peter entered moments later. She didn't look at them when she spoke. They want a sample. George's jaw tightened. Of who? Peter answered quietly. Of us. The bond between the three of them pulsed once. Not fragile, not strained, unified. Helix thought scandal was leverage, but they weren't playing for scandal. They were playing for containment. Catalina finally looked at both alphas. Then the ceremony moves forward, she said. George studied her. Even now? Especially now. Peter nodded slowly. We don't shrink. No. We expand. Chapter 12. Vanishing Point. The disappearance. Marcus Vale did not attend morning council. That alone was unusual. By noon, his estate quarters were found empty. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. Security logs scrubbed between 0213 and 0217. 4 minutes. Too clean. Victor stood in the dim corridor outside Marcus's chambers. This wasn't packwork, he said. Peter crouched near the security panel. They've escalated. George's expression had gone very still. Helix. Yes, Peter replied. Catalina felt it like a pressure change in the air. They realized he was compromised, she said. Or they silenced their liability, Nyla added. Helena's voice was cold and precise. If they have him, they will extract everything he knows. He doesn't know about us shifting, George said. No, Helena replied. But he knows ceremony timing, security layers, council structure. Peter rose slowly. They won't kill him immediately. George looked at him. They'll try to use him. Catalina's wolf was calm. Too calm. They're getting impatient. The quiet between storms. That night, for the first time since the leak, there were no strategy meetings, no board calls, no perimeter adjustments, just the three of them in the private wing. The air felt heavier, not tense, intentional. George poured wine this time, not whiskey, not war. Deliberate pause. We knew escalation would come, George said quietly. Yes, Peter replied. We didn't expect it this quickly. Catalina stepped closer to both of them, taking a sip of her wine. They want us destabilized before ceremony. Are we? Peter asked softly. She looked between them. No. Silence. But it wasn't strained. It was full, charged. George reached for her hand. Peter didn't step back. He stepped closer. This wasn't competition anymore. It wasn't secrecy. It was structure forming. Catalina turned first to George, not to reassure, to anchor. The kiss they shared wasn't urgent. It was steady, but it was passionate, grounding. Peter watched, not excluded, present. When George finally rested his forehead briefly against hers, he didn't move away immediately. He looked at Peter. Not challenge, invitation, not ownership, acceptance. Peter stepped forward slowly. His eyes darkened. Close enough now that Catalina felt both of them. Warmth on either side. You don't fracture under pressure, Peter said quietly to George. George's response was even. Neither do you. Something subtle shifted then. Catalina reached for Peter. Not hiding, not testing. Her hand slid against his chest, steady and deliberate. The bond flared. Not chaotic. Complete. When Peter kissed her this time, there was no restraint in acknowledgement, only quiet confidence. Measured, deep, intentional. George didn't look away. He stepped closer instead, hand at Catalina's waist, grounding her. Standing beside her, not against Peter. With him. The air felt charged, heavy with the promise of what lay ahead. Not unstable. It was alignment through connection. 3 heartbeats adjusting to a shared rhythm. Catalina pulled back first, taking a slow, steady breath. Emotion lingered in her eyes. "This doesn't weaken us," she said softly. "No," George agreed. Peter's voice was lower. "It strengthens us." The bond settled. Not volatile. Integrated. Outside, security rotations continued. Inside, the triad remained together, reinforcing the bond they had chosen until the weight of the day finally gave way to quiet rest. They fell asleep with a sense of peace and certainty that none of them had known before, and that tightly bound triad was far more dangerous for Helix than any scandal could ever have been. Chapter 13. Containment. The attempt. Helix moved before dawn. Not at the estate. Too fortified. They targeted movement. Catalina's convoy en route to a Silvercrest manufacturing site. Unmarked van. EMP pulse device. Signal disruption. Calculated. The escort SUVs stalled for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. Masked operatives emerged from the industrial loading bay. Tranquilizer rifles. Non-lethal. Capture protocol. Catalina felt it before the first dart fired. Her wolf surged forward violently. The convoy doors exploded open as security engaged. Gunfire. Shouting. Controlled chaos. One dart struck the rear passenger window. Cracked glass. Another grazed her shoulder. Shallow. The chemical burned. Not strong enough. Not yet. Her controls snapped. Her eyes flashed gold. The nearest operative froze, because what stepped out of that vehicle was not human anymore. The shift wasn't partial. It wasn't subtle. It was violent and complete. Massive silver wolf. Fur catching early dawn light. Power rolling off her in waves. Helix had theorized biological anomaly. They had not prepared for myth stepping into daylight. One operative tried to fire again. She was faster. He hit the pavement unconscious before he understood what he'd seen. Security forces stared, stunned, but trained enough to continue containment. Within seconds, Peter's convoy arrived from the north. George from the south. Both had felt the rupture in the bond. Anxiety, rage. They arrived to see Catalina standing in full wolf form in the middle of an industrial loading yard. Visible, unhidden, alive. Helix operatives fled, too late. Victor's team secured 2 alive. Extraction vehicles burned. Catalina shifted back slowly behind the shield of armored doors, breathing steady, eyes still glowing faintly when she stepped forward. George approached first. "You're injured." "Surface only," she replied calmly. Peter scanned the perimeter. "They wanted live capture." "Yes," she said. "And now?" George asked quietly. She looked at both of them. "Now they know." The fallout news didn't break publicly. Helix had contained their own perimeter cameras, but internal Helix files updated immediately. Confirmed. Non-human transformation capability. Project Cerberus moved from research to acquisition priority. Back at the estate, the triad stood in the war room. Marcus was still missing. Helix had attempted capture, and Catalina had shifted outside protected grounds. Peter looked at her carefully. "Protective? You didn't hesitate." "No." George's gaze softened slightly. "Good." The bond between them didn't flare anxiously this time. It steadied. Calm. Helix wanted containment. They had just accelerated war. Chapter 14. Extraction. The location. Marcus wasn't dead. Helix needed him conscious. Rami cracked the signal piggybacking through the implant Peter had planted during the server breach. It led to a secondary facility. Not corporate. Not public. An abandoned biotech warehouse outside the city perimeter. Off-grid generators, Rami reported. Heavy shielding. Minimal digital footprint. Peter studied the schematics. They're holding him there until transfer. Transfer where? Nyla asked. Peter's voice was cold. Somewhere we can't reach. George looked at Catalina. You stay Central Command. She held his gaze. Not this time. Silence. Peter spoke carefully. If they're experimenting on him, they're monitoring for abnormal signatures. If you shift there, I won't, she replied calmly. George measured her. You lead Overwatch, he decided. Direct command. If extraction fails, you make the call. It wasn't exclusion. It was trust. She nodded once. By key. The breach helix security expected intrusion. They did not expect coordination. George's unit breached west entry. Peter's north. Victor cut external power precisely 23 seconds before entry. Night swallowed the compound. Inside, helix personnel scrambled. Marcus was restrained in a reinforced containment chair. Disoriented, but alive. When Peter reached him first, Marcus's eyes widened in horror. You shouldn't have come, Marcus whispered hoarsely. You shouldn't have sent those files, Peter replied evenly while unlocking restraints. Gunfire echoed down the corridor. George entered moments later. Movement east wing, he warned. Marcus struggled to stand. They know about the ceremony, he rasped. They want to take her there. George's expression went lethal. They won't. Extraction team moved. But Helix had prepared. Steel shutters slammed down in the main corridor. Gas vents hissed. Peter swore. Sedative dispersal. Mask up, George ordered. They moved through it. Controlled breathing, partial shifts to heighten resistance. Security forces engaged. Helix operatives weren't ordinary guards. They moved with tactical precision, trained for containment, not kill shots. Which told George everything. They wanted live specimens. Victor detonated internal override charges. The shutters failed. Extraction resumed. Within 7 minutes, Marcus was outside the compound perimeter. Alive. Shaken. Rescued. 3. Acceleration. Back at the estate, Catalina listened as the mission debrief unfolded. They're escalating capture protocols, Peter said. They deployed aerosol sedatives, George added. Marcus sat in a medical chair, pale but conscious. They kept saying, Phase 2, he murmured. They're not done. Catalina's wolf was steady. Then she spoke. We moved the ceremony. All eyes shifted. George didn't hesitate. How soon? 1 week. Shock rippled through the room. Peter's gaze sharpened. Security implications are significant. So is delay, she replied. Helix wanted leverage before bonding sealed fully. Then remove the window. George nodded once. Announce it. The ceremony would not be postponed. It would be accelerated. Chapter 15, Exposure Threshold. Human attention, the Industrial District assault, did not go unnoticed. Emergency response teams had logged strange readings, unidentified EMP signature, unregistered firearms, structural damage inconsistent with normal crime. A municipal security task force opened a quiet investigation, not into wolves, into organized paramilitary activity, which meant increased patrols, more cameras, more eyes. Peter reviewed the intelligence briefing. We're drawing civilian scrutiny. George exhaled slowly. We can't erase everything. No, Catalina said. But we can redirect it. Corporate influence shifted media narrative toward industrial sabotage by rival biotech firms. Convincing, temporary, but thin. 2. Helix evolves. 3 nights before the accelerated ceremony, Helix deployed Phase 2. Drone surveillance. Thermal isolation nets. Frequency disruptors calibrated to energy spikes recorded during Catalina's shift. They had adapted quickly. Rami detected the first drone at 0217. It's not standard surveillance, he warned. It's scanning biosignatures. Peter's jaw tightened. They're mapping transformation thresholds. George looked at Catalina. They're preparing containment fields. She nodded once. Yes. 3. The demonstration and Instead of hiding, Catalina stepped into the courtyard at dawn. Pack assembled. Betas at flanks. George and Peter on either side. Drones hovered at the perimeter tree line. Watching. Recording. Catalina lifted her chin. "They're studying us," she said quietly to the two alphas. "Then give them something to study," George replied. Peter's eyes darkened slightly. "Controlled." She nodded and shifted. Not explosively, not violently, gracefully. Silver fur cascading into form as dawn light broke over the estate. Power radiated outward, steady, immense. The drones stuttered. Frequency disruptors activated. The air hummed. The first containment net fired. It dissolved mid-air before reaching her, energy rebounding violently into the drone. 2 units fell from the sky in smoking spirals. The remaining drones retreated. Not destroyed. Warned. Catalina shifted back calmly. The pack had witnessed it. Strength. Control. No fear. George stepped forward. "Ceremony proceeds in 4 days." Peter's voice carried across the courtyard, firm with a thread of steel. "And anyone who attempts interference will be dealt with." Not threatened, promised. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 16. Blood Oath. The Gathering. The ceremony grounds were not hidden deep in forest myth. They were in the protected wild reserve beyond the modern estate, the place where pack runs happened, city skyline visible in the distance. Civilization near, power closer. 2 packs assembled in formal black. Silvercrest to the west, Northern Ridge to the east. Betas aligned. Gammas forming perimeter. Helena and Adrian seated at equal elevation. Catalina stood between George and Peter. White ceremonial gown. Modern, severe, structured. Dark hair flowing down her back. Not fragile. Regal. Both alphas wore dark-tailored suits. Not ancient ritual. Contemporary dominance. The ceremonial blade rested on a polished stone altar. Blood sharing would seal the pack link. Irreversible. Peter leaned slightly toward George. "Drones are present," he murmured. "I know," George replied calmly. They had allowed it. Bait. 2. The betrayal resurfaces. As the ritual began, Marcus stepped forward, visibly shaken but present. He took his seat. He had insisted on attending. "I owe this pack acknowledgement," he had said earlier. Now, as Catalina reached for the ceremonial blade, a pulse rippled through the air. Frequency disruptors hidden beneath the ceremonial platform activated. Subtle. Embedded. Internal access. Someone had planted them. The ground beneath the altar vibrated. Catalina staggered slightly as the energy field constricted around the central platform. Heater's eyes flashed. Containment field. George turned sharply. "Source?" Rami's voice crackled through comms. "Internal trigger. It's coming from beneath the altar." Gasps rippled through the pack, and then Elder Tomas Reed stepped forward from Silvercrest ranks. Not Marcus. Another traditionalist. His expression was rigid, filled with fury. "You call this evolution?" he shouted. "You expose us to hunters and call it strength?" Shock rippled outward. "You gave them proof," he continued, gesturing at Catalina. "And now they come for us all." He had justified it in his mind. Prevent the ceremony. Prevent full triad sealing. Remove the leverage. But he had miscalculated one thing. The triad was already bonded. The field tightened around Catalina. Helix drones surged forward from the tree line. Dozens now. Containment nets primed. Live capture protocol. Public. Bold. Reckless. 3. The choice Peter moved first. He stepped directly into the containment field. Energy surged violently around him. George followed without hesitation. 3 inside. Not one isolated. The frequency disruptors intensified, designed to destabilize transformation thresholds. Catalina's wolf roared inside her mind. Not afraid. Furious. "Don't shift yet," Peter said through clenched control. "They're calibrating." George's hand found hers. "On my count," he murmured. Outside the field, Betas engaged Helix ground operatives who were now breaching outer perimeter. Gunfire. Shouting. Chaos rippling through ceremony ranks. Tomas Reed looked suddenly uncertain. This had escalated beyond his intent. Helix had never promised live assault. They had promised intervention. He had been naive. Catalina lifted her chin. "They want to see one alpha destabilized," she said calmly inside the field. "Let's show them 3. Peter's gaze locked with George's. No rivalry, no hesitation. Shared count. 1, 2, 3. They shifted together. Not sequentially. Simultaneously. The containment field overloaded instantly. 3 massive wolves erupted in the center of the ceremonial platform. Silver, dark, ash gold. Energy spiked beyond Helix calibration models. The field shattered. Shockwave blasted outward. Drones fell from the sky in burning arcs. Helix operatives stumbled under the surge. The pack fell silent in awe, because what stood before them was not fracture, it was unity, made physical. 3 alphas aligned, the bond sealed fully in that instant, not through blade, through war. IV, the blood oath. When the dust settled, Helix forces were retreating, containment tech destroyed, operatives captured. Tomas Reed stood frozen, realizing too late what he had risked. George shifted back first. Human again. Uninjured. Peter followed. Then Catalina. The field crackled and died completely. Silence. Heavy. Sacred. George stepped toward Tomas. "You endangered the pack." Tomas swallowed hard. "I thought you stopped thinking." Peter cut in coldly. Catalina picked up the ceremonial blade. Her voice carried across both packs. The ceremony proceeds. No one challenged her. George sliced his palm first. Blood fell onto the stone. Peter did the same. Catalina last. She pressed her palm over theirs. 3 bloodlines mixing. Pack bond igniting across both territories like wildfire. The energy this time was not explosive. It was deep, anchoring, permanent. Helena bowed her head first. Adrian followed. Then both packs bent knee. Not in fear, in recognition. V. The aftermath. Helix had footage. But they also had losses. Destroyed tech. Captured operatives. Proof that containment wasn't simple. Human task force sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Too late. Ceremony complete. Bond sealed. Internal betrayal exposed publicly. Tomas was escorted away quietly. Not executed, but removed from council. Demoted. The triad stood together before the pack. Not controversial. Not unstable. Unbreakable. Peter glanced toward the tree line. "They'll regroup." "Yes," George replied. Catalina's gaze hardened. "So will we." Chapter 17. Marked. The estate was quiet again. Not fragile. Not tense. Settled. The bond had changed after the ceremony. It no longer pulsed uncertainly between them. It flowed. Deep. Steady. Constant. Catalina stood in the private suite reserved for Luna rites. Not ancient stone. Not forest altar. She was dressed in red silk especially for this very night. Modern. Low light. Glass walls. The city glowing below. George entered first. Peter, moments later. No ceremony crowd. No council. Just the 3 of them. The air felt heavier. Filled with anticipation, but not strained. George approached her slowly. "This is not for the pack," he said quietly. "It's for us," Peter finished. She nodded. "Yes." In triad bonds, marking was private, intimate, deeply personal. Sacred, but more than that, symbolic surrender of isolation. George lifted her hand first. Not claiming, asking. She turned her wrist slightly. Permission given. His bite wasn't violent. It was controlled. Precise. A sharp sting that bled into warmth instantly as the mark formed. Her wolf surged, not in pain, in recognition. Peter stepped closer as George pulled back. Her pulse was steady. She lifted her chin. "Don't hesitate," she murmured to Peter. "I won't," he replied. He marked the opposite side. Balanced. Equal. Her wolf stirred again, this time with quiet certainty and a profound sense of belonging. The bond snapped fully into place. Not 3 threads anymore. One structure. Catalina inhaled sharply as the energy rippled through her spine. Her wolf pressed forward with quiet satisfaction. Not divided. Aligned. She looked at George first, then Peter. "You're not observers," she said softly. "Never were," George replied. She stepped closer to both of them. This time the touch wasn't hesitant. Her hands moved to George's face as she pulled him into a gentle kiss. Peter's hand found her waist, offering quiet reassurance as he stood beside her. He rested his forehead lightly against hers, reminding her she was no longer facing the future alone. No rush, no uncertainty. The closeness that followed wasn't overwhelming. It was deliberate, steady, meaningful. 3 souls adjusting to a shared bond. 3 leaders, choosing connection without dominance games. When George kissed her, Peter remained close, present, never distant. When Peter offered his quiet support, George didn't withdraw. He remained beside them, completing the circle they had chosen together. The dynamic had shifted. It wasn't a triangle pulling at tension points anymore. It was a closed circuit. The mating bond sealed not with chaos, but with shared trust, quiet understanding, and unwavering unity. Steady breaths, quiet smiles, shared strength, mutual trust. The energy that flowed through the bond was powerful, deep and anchoring, the kind that reshaped instinct and strengthened every promise they had made. Afterward, the city lights still shimmered beyond the glass. Catalina stood between them, feeling calmer than she had in a very long time. Not claimed by one, supported by both. George traced his thumb lightly along her marked wrist. Peter's hand rested over her heart. "You feel different," George said quietly. "Stronger," she answered. Peter nodded once. Yes. The bond hummed steadily. No instability, no fracture, just structure. Chapter 18. Knock knock. The knock came 3 days later. Not physical, official. A formal request for meeting from the Metropolitan Security Task Authority. Signed by Director Elaine Mercer. Reason: inquiry into industrial incidents, weapons discharge, and unidentified aerial technology disruptions. Human language for, "We noticed." George read the document once. Peter read it twice. Catalina remained calm. "They don't know what they're asking," Nyla said. "No," Catalina replied, "but they will keep asking." Helena folded her hands. "If we stonewall, they escalate legally. If we intimidate, they escalate militarily," Victor added. Peter's gaze sharpened. "They're not Helix." "No," George agreed, "but they could become leverage for Helix." Catalina stepped forward. "Then we don't hide." Silence. "You want to meet them?" George asked. "Yes." Peter studied her carefully. "They'll probe for inconsistencies. They already are." She exhaled slowly. "We control the narrative." George considered. "You will not shift in front of them." "I won't." Peter added quietly, "But if Helix feeds them evidence, then we pivot," she replied. The bond between them pulsed once. Steady, no fear. Outside the estate gates, black government SUVs rolled into position. Not hostile, not friendly, curious. Director Mercer stepped out first. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. Human, observant, and entirely unaware she was about to sit across from 3 bonded alphas who had just declared war on a private hunting organization. George adjusted his cufflinks. Peter straightened his jacket. Catalina moved between them. Modern packs lived beside humanity. Now humanity was knocking. Chapter 19. Civil Masks. The meeting. Director Elaine Mercer did not waste time. She entered Silvercrest's executive conference room with 2 deputies and a tablet full of incident reports. Catalina sat at the head of the table, George to her right, Peter to her left. Deliberate symmetry. Industrial sabotage, Mercer began evenly. High-grade tactical weapons, EMP signatures, drone interference, and multiple eyewitness reports describing, she paused, unusual phenomena. Catalina's expression didn't change. You're investigating helix dynamics, she said calmly. Mercer's eyes flickered. You're aware of them. We're competitors in several biotech patents, Peter replied smoothly. Not a lie, just incomplete. Mercer tapped her tablet. We've received anonymous footage suggesting your organization is involved in a violent escalation. The grainy terrace clip appeared on the screen. Peter and Catalina. Close. Controlled. Not incriminating, but intimate. Mercer studied them carefully. Is your leadership structure unstable? George almost smiled. No. The confidence in his tone was unshakable. Catalina leaned forward slightly. Director Mercer, Helix has engaged in corporate espionage and illegal paramilitary escalation. We are prepared to provide you evidence. Mercer's brows lifted slightly. You're cooperating? We prefer order, Peter said calmly. Mercer held Catalina's gaze. You're not afraid of scrutiny. Catalina's voice was steady. No. Because fear gives away truth. Confidence reframes it. The undercurrent 2 floors below, Rami intercepted an encrypted transmission. Helix unnamed task force contact. Energy spike correlation matches bioadaptive anomaly. Continue pressure. Someone inside Mercer's task force was feeding Helix. Victor brought it to George immediately. There's a leak on their side, he said. Peter's jaw tightened. They're steering the investigation. Catalina absorbed that quietly. Then Mercer isn't our enemy, she said. She's being nudged, George agreed, which made things more complicated and more dangerous. 3. The one who notices Deputy Director Caleb Shaw lingered after the meeting. Mid-30s. Military background. Sharp instincts. He had reviewed the footage frame by frame. There was something in Catalina's posture, in Peter's proximity, in the way George positioned himself. Predatory symmetry. Not romantic. Structural. He watched them leave the conference room together. Too aligned. Too aware. He didn't believe in myths, but he believed in patterns. And this pattern wasn't human. IV. After the masks that night, the estate felt different again. The world had stepped closer. The bond reacted to that pressure. Catalina stood in the dim private suite, city lights reflecting off glass. George removed his jacket slowly. Peter loosened his collar. No words at first. The meeting had required restraint. Human pacing. Human tone. Human limits. Here, there were none. George approached her first. His hands settled gently at her waist as he leaned close, pressing a soft kiss against her temple. You held your control perfectly, he said quietly. You felt the push, she replied. Yes. Peter stepped behind her, close enough that she could feel his reassuring presence. His hands rested lightly on her shoulders, and she relaxed into the quiet comfort of the moment. The bond pulsed, steady and alive. They're circling, Peter murmured near her ear, but not close enough. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a slow breath as the bond flowed through all 3 of them, easing the weight of everything they had faced that day. The pressure from the outside world only strengthened the connection they shared inside. She turned toward Peter this time, her fingers brushing the front of his shirt before she looked into his eyes. No hesitation now, no distance. The kiss they shared carried every unspoken promise between them. George rested a steady hand against her back, grounding them both as the bond flared warm and strong between the 3 of them. Powerful, certain, unshakable. Peter smiled before resting his forehead against hers. The bond pulsed steadily, settled. She pulled back slightly, looking between them. You don't compete, she said softly. George's gaze softened. No, we reinforce. It was George's turn. Peter guided Catalina toward the bed, where the three of them settled together, sharing a quiet moment as the bond continued to strengthen around them. Peter's hand rested gently at her side, a silent reminder that she was never alone. George moved closer, taking her hand as their eyes met. The closeness that followed wasn't chaotic. It was synchronized. Time seemed to fade away as the bond settled deeper into each of them. Three souls learning one another's rhythm. Three leaders who trusted one another completely. George's quiet strength offered stability. Peter's unwavering presence brought confidence. Catalina remained at the center, surrounded by a bond that no longer felt divided, but whole, empowered, stronger. The bond pulsed in steady waves, threading them together without fracture. When they finally sat together in comfortable silence, the world outside still hummed with surveillance and suspicion. But inside, there was no doubt, no imbalance, only unity, only trust, only the quiet certainty that they would face whatever came next together. The escalation. The next morning, Mercer received new evidence. Anonymous drop, drone footage from the ceremony, the simultaneous shift. Clearer than before, Helix had cleaned it up, enhanced it, calibrated it. Caleb Shaw watched the slowed footage frame by frame. 3 figures, then 3 wolves. His pulse didn't spike. It steadied, because now the pattern made sense. He didn't rush to Mercer. He didn't alert Federal Command. He closed the file quietly and opened a private research folder. If this was real, the world wasn't ready, and neither was Helix. Chapter 20. Lines in the Open. The approach. Caleb Shaw did not request a formal meeting. He requested coffee, neutral location, public, unthreatening. Catalina accepted. George didn't love it, Peter didn't either, but neither tried to stop her. Public venue, Peter said calmly. 2 blocks from the estate. We'll have eyes. George adjusted his watch. If he pushes too far, you leave. I know, she replied. The cafe was modern, glass-fronted, ordinary, which made what Caleb brought anything but. He sat across from her with no preamble. I've seen the enhanced footage, he said quietly. Catalina didn't flinch. And? You're not running a paramilitary group. No. He leaned forward slightly. You're something else. Silence stretched. Not hostile. Measured. Caleb's voice lowered. I'm not here to expose you. That caught her attention. Then why are you here? Because Helix isn't just sending us footage, he said. They're pushing federal escalation protocols. Her eyes sharpened. They want military involvement. Yes. Which meant capture wouldn't be corporate anymore. It would be national. Caleb held her gaze steadily. If I escalate this officially, you become classified threat. If I don't, I need assurance you're not. The air between them tightened. You're asking for trust, she said. Yes. You don't even know what I am. His jaw flexed slightly. I know you could have eliminated Helix after that ceremony. She said nothing. And you didn't. That was his calculation. Catalina leaned back slightly. What do you want, Deputy Director? Proof you're not the destabilizing force here. She considered him carefully. Then, watch Helix. He blinked. Excuse me? They escalate first. They push. They destabilize. Track them. He studied her for a long moment. You're asking me to redirect federal scrutiny. I'm asking you to follow the real aggressor. A beat. Then Caleb nodded once. If you're lying to me, I'm not. He stood. And if this goes beyond my ability to contain? It won't, she said calmly. She hoped that was true. Helix, overplays. 3 nights later, Helix made their mistake. They leaked partial ceremony footage to a fringe media outlet. Clipped, distorted, framed as biotech experiment gone wrong. The problem? They included a timestamp. Caleb saw it instantly. That timestamp matched a Helix surveillance drone confiscated in the industrial raid, which meant Helix had illegally operated unregistered tech inside city limits. Federal violation. Caleb didn't go to Mercer first. He went to Internal Affairs and quietly opened an investigation into Helix. The task force shifted direction, subtly, but decisively. 3. The pushback Helix responded fast. A coordinated cyber attack targeted Silvercrest and Northern Ridge infrastructure. Power grids flickered. Logistics hubs stalled. Stock prices dipped. Human markets reacted faster than wolves. George stood in the strategy wing. They're escalating economically. Peter nodded. They want us reactive. Catalina's wolf was calm. No, she said. They want us visible. Silence. Then we stop being quiet. George replied. IV. The press move. For the first time, Catalina stepped into public view deliberately. Press conference. Not about wolves, about corporate sabotage. Silvercrest and Northern Ridge announced a joint legal action against Helix for illegal surveillance and paramilitary conduct. Evidence included drone serial numbers, EMP residue analysis, internal Helix communications, sanitized. Caleb watched from the back of the room. Helix had tried to frame wolves as anomaly. Now they looked like rogue aggressors. Mercer turned to him quietly. You think this is all corporate? Caleb didn't answer immediately. No, he said carefully. But I think Helix is hiding something bigger. Which was true. Just not the whole truth. Nightfall. That night, the estate felt charged. Not from fear, from momentum. Catalina entered the private wing to find both alphas already there, waiting. George looked at her first. You shifted the narrative. Yes. Peter's eyes lingered on her. And you trusted a human. Yes. George stepped closer. Do you trust him? No. Peter almost smiled faintly. Good. She moved between them. The bond pulsed warm, steady, grounded. Helix is losing control, she said softly. They'll do something reckless, Peter replied. Then we prepare, George finished. But preparation didn't mean distance. It meant reinforcement. George gently drew her into a brief kiss. Slower this time. Intentional. Peter's hand rested lightly at her waist. A quiet reminder that he stood beside her. The closeness that followed wasn't reactive. It was reassuring. Deep. Steady. 3 leaders choosing connection before the coming storm. Their rhythm was no longer uncertain, no hesitation. It was sure, confident. Catalina no longer felt pulled in 2 directions. She felt supported on both sides. Aligned. When they finally stepped back and the silence settled around them, the bond hummed deep and steady. Outside, federal investigators quietly began auditing Helix accounts. Helix didn't yet know they were under internal investigation, and Caleb Shaw sat alone in his office, staring at paused footage of 3 wolves shifting in unison. Not with fear, with calculation. The world was balancing on something ancient, and he had just stepped onto the line. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 21. Humanity Knocks. The first official knock on the door of their hidden world. The morning after the bond sealed felt different. Not quieter, not calmer. Charged. Catalina woke between them, sunlight cutting through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the modern estate overlooking the city outskirts. George's arm was draped possessively over her waist. Peter lay close behind her, his warmth steady, grounding. For the first time since the rogue attack, the wolves inside them were still, content. Then George's phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. He didn't move at first. Peter did. Beta line, Peter murmured, already alert. George exhaled and reached for the phone. Victor's voice came through sharp and controlled. Alpha, we have a situation. George sat up. Catalina followed, sensing the shift instantly through the bond. What kind of situation? George asked. City authorities are at the south perimeter. Not police. Federal. Peter's eyes hardened. How many? He asked. 6 vehicles. Unmarked. They're requesting a meeting. They're using language that suggests they already know something. Silence. Catalina felt it then. Not fear. Calculation. Peter stood, running a hand through his dark hair, the faint line of his Iron Man shave catching the morning light. The ceremony, he said quietly. Too many witnesses. George nodded slowly. Or someone inside. The bond flared. Nyla's voice came through Catalina's mind from the Northern Ridge pack link. They have satellite footage of the energy surge. That's what they're calling it. An atmospheric anomaly. Catalina stood. Then we don't deny, she said calmly. Both alphas looked at her. We don't confirm either, she continued. We give them something controlled. Something human. Peter studied her. George's lips curved slightly. Our Luna wants to negotiate. No, Catalina said softly. Our Luna wants to protect her people. That silenced them both. Peter moved first, stepping close, brushing his knuckles down her arm. The connection pulsed. Steady. Unified. Then we meet them together. George nodded. As one leadership. Outside, in the city below, sirens wailed in the distance. Humanity had begun knocking. And this time, the wolves would answer. Chapter 22. The Anomaly. The meeting was held in the glass council hall overlooking the city. Modern architecture. Clean lines. Steel and stone. Nothing about it said ancient predators hiding in plain sight. That was intentional. Catalina stood between George and Peter as the federal delegation entered. 6 people, all composed, all watching. The man in front did not look like a soldier. He looked like someone who made soldiers nervous. Tall, silver threaded through dark hair, measured eyes, calm pulse, too calm. George stepped forward first. I'm Alpha George. His tone was polite, not submissive. Peter did not move. He didn't need to. And you are? George asked. The man extended his hand. Director Adrian Keller, Federal Strategic Bioadaptation Division. That name meant nothing to the humans watching. But Peter's wolf shifted inside him. Bioadaptation. Enhanced humans. Keller's eyes flicked briefly to Catalina, then to Peter, then to George. And this must be the anomaly, he said mildly. George's jaw tightened. Catalina stepped forward before either alpha could answer. I'm Catalina. She did not offer her title. Keller smiled faintly. You created quite the atmospheric disturbance 3 nights ago. Energy spike equivalent to classified weapons testing. Peter crossed his arms. We don't test weapons here. No, Keller replied calmly. You are the weapons. Silence. The air thickened. Keller opened a slim folder and slid a holographic tablet across the table. Satellite images. The ceremony. The surge of power when the 3 of them shared blood. A visible wave radiating outward. Human technology had caught it. We have been monitoring anomalous genetic signatures for over 20 years, Keller continued. Increased strength, accelerated healing, heightened aggression patterns tied to lunar cycles. His gaze sharpened slightly. You're not the first. Peter stilled. George's voice dropped a fraction. Clarify. Keller held his stare. My great-grandmother disappeared in 1943. The room went quiet in a different way. Officially, she was declared missing during a border conflict, Keller continued. Unofficially, family records state she married into something called a northern bloodline. Peter's eyes flashed gold for a split second. Keller noticed. Of course he did. I do not intend to expose you, Keller said carefully, but I need to understand what you are, because other governments are noticing the same anomalies. Catalina felt the shift through the bond. This wasn't a threat. This was a warning. George folded his hands behind his back. And what do you think we are? Keller's gaze settled on Catalina again. Evolution, he said. Then, and if evolution can be understood, it can be replicated. There it was. Peter stepped forward slightly, voice smooth but edged. Careful. Keller didn't flinch. "I'm not here to capture you," he said evenly. "I'm here because something else is moving." Catalina felt it before he said it. "A program," Keller continued. "Black-funded. Off books. Attempting to engineer enhanced humans artificially." George's expression went cold. "You're saying someone is trying to create what we are?" "Yes." "And failing?" "For now." Silence pressed in. Then Keller added one more thing. "And the energy surge from your ceremony just told them it's possible." The wolves inside the room stirred. Catalina reached for both her alphas through the bond. Steady, united. "If someone is trying to create monsters," she said quietly, "they will need real blood to do it." Keller's eyes darkened. Yes. And now the real war had just begun. Chapter 23. Capture. It happened 3 nights after the federal meeting. Not during a ceremony. Not during a council vote. Not during a city appearance. It happened during a run. The hidden wildlands were supposed to be safe. The moon hung low, silver against the dark stretch of protected forest beyond the city limits. Catalina ran between her alphas in wolf form, white gold fur flashing between George's pale strength and Peter's darker, powerful stride. The bond hummed. Alive. Stable. Then, the scent hit first. Metal. Chemicals. Not human sweat. Something sharper. Peter skidded to a halt. George snarled low. Too late. A flash. A pulse of sound that didn't belong in the natural world. Catalina's wolf staggered as something exploded against the trees ahead. Netting, electrified, humming with a frequency that bit against wolf senses. From the left, a scream. Victor. Not a battle cry. A shock. Catalina shifted mid-run, stumbling as she forced herself back into human form. Peter and George followed instantly. "Victor!" Peter roared. They burst through the trees. Too late. 4 black-armored figures dragged a restrained form toward an unmarked vehicle hidden beyond the tree line. Victor's wolf form was bound in reinforced mesh, glowing faintly. George lunged. A second pulse detonated against the ground, forcing him back with a blast of concussive energy. Peter's eyes burned gold. "They're targeting him specifically." One of the figures turned. Helmet visor reflective. Target secured. Extraction confirmed. The vehicle roared to life. Catalina felt something colder than fear settle in her bones. They knew exactly who to take. The vehicle vanished into the night, and the forest fell silent. Back at the estate, chaos rippled through both packs. Nyla stood rigid, fury barely contained. "They bypassed patrol routes," she said. "They knew the blind spots." George's jaw tightened. Inside information. Peter was already issuing orders through the Northern Ridge Link. Lock down all secondary compounds. Increase perimeter tech. No one runs alone. Catalina stepped into the center of the room. "This isn't random," she said quietly. Everyone turned. They didn't take an alpha. They didn't take a Luna. She looked at Peter. "They took a beta." Peter nodded slowly. "They want second-tier blood," he said. "Strong enough to study. Not strong enough to trigger immediate retaliation at a national level." George's wolf pressed against his control. "They're underestimating what a beta means to us." Before anyone could respond, another message came in. This one not from humans. From a neighboring pack. The Crimson Veil. George's expression darkened as he read it. "They're requesting alliance talks," he said. Peter scoffed. "Convenient timing." Catalina extended her hand. "Let me see." She read the message carefully. "We are aware of the human initiative. We believe controlled cooperation is the future. Voluntary genetic contribution ensures survival. And leverage." Her stomach turned. "They're offering their blood." Silence. Nyla swore under her breath. "They think they can negotiate power," George said coldly. Peter's voice dropped lower. "If one pack gives humans a sample willingly, every pack becomes vulnerable." Catalina felt it then. The fracture line. External threat, internal ambition. "They're scared," she said quietly. George looked at her sharply. They think if humans can create enhanced soldiers, wolves become obsolete, she continued. So they're trying to buy protection. Peter stepped closer to her, voice softer now. And what do you think? Catalina met both their eyes. I think if humans learn how to replicate us, they won't stop at soldiers. She paused. They'll want control. The room felt heavier. Then Catalina added, We get Victor back first. Peter's wolf surged in agreement. George nodded. And 𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂? Catalina's gaze sharpened. We attend their alliance talk. A slow smile curved Peter's mouth. Together. George's eyes glinted. And we remind them why we don't beg humans for protection. Outside, beyond the city lights, something far more dangerous than rogues had begun moving. And now the packs were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to remain irreplaceable. Chapter 24. Black Site. The facility wasn't on any map. Abandoned industrial zone outside the city. Decommissioned water treatment plant. Rusted exterior. Dead windows. Too quiet. Peter crouched on a ridge overlooking the compound. Dark tactical gear blending into the night. Beside him, George adjusted a small comm device Nyla had insisted they use. Human tech to infiltrate human tech. Catalina stood between them, wind catching her hair. She could feel Victor, faint, but alive. They're suppressing him, she whispered. Something chemical. Peter's jaw flexed. I can smell it from here. Synthetic sedative. George scanned the perimeter. Thermal cameras. Motion sensors. 2 external patrol units. Peter smirked faintly. They really think we're animals. Catalina's eyes sharpened. Let's show them we're not. Inside the facility, Victor was awake. Barely. Cold metal table. Restrained wrists. Electrodes at his temples. He'd already shifted twice. They learned fast. The next injection burned through his veins, suppressing the change before it could complete. A woman in a lab coat stepped closer. Subject displays remarkable regenerative resistance, she said to someone behind a glass panel. Beta classification confirmed. Victor laughed weakly. Beta? He rasped. You should see my alphas. Behind the glass stood Director Keller. His expression wasn't cruel. It was calculating. Begin Phase 2, Keller ordered quietly. The machine behind Victor powered up. Not to kill, to map. To extract data. Victor closed his eyes. And then, he let his wolf surface. Not physically, mentally. The bond link wasn't fully severed, just dampened. He reached through it. Peter, Alpha. They're scanning neural pathways. There was a crackle of resistance. Then Peter's voice, distant but furious. Hold. We're outside. They've started something, Catalina said suddenly. Peter's eyes flared gold. He's pushing back. George nodded once. Then we move. No more discussion. They descended like a storm. Peter eliminated the first patrol before the man could even scream. Non-lethal, but decisive. George disabled a surveillance tower with a single strike to its power unit. Catalina moved straight for the main entrance. A security door slammed down in front of her. She didn't hesitate. Her hand pressed flat against the steel, and she pushed. The door buckled inward with a shriek of tortured metal. Inside, alarms blared. Red lights flooded the corridor. Human voices shouted. Containment breach. Too late. Inside the lab. The machine surged. Pain lanced through Victor's skull. And something unexpected happened. The scanner short-circuited. Data spiked beyond its limits. The monitors flickered violently. One technician stumbled back. It's overloading. Keller stepped forward sharply. Shut it down. Victor grinned through blood. You wanted evolution, he muttered. The machine exploded in a shower of sparks. Glass shattered as Peter came through it like a wrecking force. George followed, controlled but lethal. Catalina entered last, silent, deadly calm. Keller raised his hands slowly. I warned you something else was moving, he said evenly. Peter crossed the room in seconds, grabbing him by the collar. You don't take my beta. Keller didn't struggle. This wasn't my extraction team. That stopped George mid-step. What? He demanded. Keller nodded toward the far wall. Look. Catalina turned and felt her stomach drop. On the wall-mounted screen was a secondary feed. Different uniforms, different insignia. Crimson Veil. The kidnapping hadn't been federal. It had been facilitated. A joint operation. One rogue human faction. One cooperating wolf pack. Catalina's eyes went cold. They didn't offer alliance, she whispered. They offered access. Peter released Keller slowly. George moved to free Victor, snapping restraints like twigs. Victor slid off the table, weak but upright. Told you, he rasped, glancing at Peter. Should have taken an alpha. Catalina stepped closer to the screen. Crimson Veil's alpha appeared briefly in the footage, speaking to a human operative. Controlled cooperation ensures dominance. Her wolf snarled inside her. George came to her side. Political response? He asked quietly. Peter joined them, dark and dangerous. Or war. Catalina watched the footage loop. Then she said calmly, We attend their alliance summit. Peter's eyes gleamed. And? Catalina's voice dropped to something almost regal. And we expose them in front of every pack. The war wasn't just human anymore. It was internal. And this time, they would not be reacting. They would be striking first. Chapter 25. The Crack in the Bond. The estate was quieter than usual. Too quiet. After the Black Site rescue and Crimson Veil footage, the packs were unified in anger. Patrols doubled. Territory sealed. Communication encrypted. Victor was recovering. The summit invitation had been sent. Everything looked controlled, which meant the fracture would not come from outside. It would come from within. Catalina stood alone on the balcony overlooking the forest. The moon was thinner tonight. Her bond with Peter and George pulsed steady, warm, protective. And beneath that, something else, a faint static, like interference. She frowned. Peter stepped behind her, resting his hands on her waist. You feel it too, he murmured. She nodded. Not danger. George joined them a moment later. But imbalance, he said quietly. Before Catalina could respond, a scream tore through the eastern wing of the estate. Not human. Wolf. Peter moved first. George followed. Catalina didn't run. She shifted. They reached the comms room to find 2 guards unconscious. Not dead. Precise. Intentional. Inside, Nyla stood rigid in the center of the room. Her expression was wrong. Too still. Peter's eyes narrowed. Report. Nyla looked at him, and for the first time since Catalina had met her, there was no warmth in her gaze. They know about the summit exposure plan, she said calmly. George froze. We haven't announced it. Nyla nodded once. You told only inner command. Silence. Catalina's heart did not race. It slowed. You've been feeding them patrol data, she said softly. Not accusation. Recognition. Nyla didn't deny it. Peter's wolf slammed against his control. Why? It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was disbelief. Nyla finally let emotion surface. Because you're underestimating the scale of this, she said. The humans aren't experimenting to control us. She looked at Catalina. They're preparing for something else. George stepped forward. You collaborated with Crimson Veil. Yes. The word hit like a blade. They approached me months ago, Nyla continued. Before the federal task force was public, they showed me intercepted intelligence. Catalina's voice dropped. What intelligence? Nyla swallowed once. There's a third faction. The room went very still. Not government, Nyla said. Not rogue scientists. Something private. Funded. Hidden. Peter's jaw flexed. And you decided betrayal was the solution? I decided survival was. She looked directly at Catalina now. They don't want beta samples. They don't want soldier replication. Her voice lowered. They want Luna blood. The bond between Catalina and her alphas surged violently. George's eyes burned flashing gold. They can't access her without us. Nyla's expression broke slightly. They already tried. Catalina's mind snapped back to the interference. The static in her bond. The black site neural scan spike. They weren't mapping Victor, she whispered. They were calibrating. Nyla nodded. For her frequency. Silence fell like a guillotine. Peter took one step forward. You should have told us. Nyla's voice cracked for the first time. You would have declared war too soon. And instead? George asked coldly. I bought time. Catalina stepped forward before either Alpha could move further. Did you give them my location? She asked quietly. Nyla hesitated. That was answer enough. The air changed. Peter's wolf surged fully to the surface, barely restrained. George's energy went ice cold. Betrayal inside the inner circle wasn't just strategic. It was personal. Nyla dropped to one knee. I never intended for them to touch you. I controlled the intel. I filtered it. I redirected operations. Catalina looked down at her. And when control fails? Nyla met her eyes. Then you kill me. Peter growled low. George waited for Catalina's decision. Because that was the shift now. She wasn't just Luna. She was sovereign. Catalina crouched slowly in front of Nyla. You believed you were protecting us, she said. Yes. You broke trust to do it. Nyla closed her eyes briefly. Yes. Catalina stood. Her voice when she spoke was calm, clear, terrifying. You're confined, guarded, alive. Peter's head snapped toward her. George studied her carefully. Until the summit, Catalina continued. Then you testify. Nyla's eyes widened. You're exposing me? I'm exposing the truth, Catalina corrected softly. All of it. She turned away. And if your third faction exists, her gaze sharpened, then this doesn't end with a human war. Peter stepped beside her. George mirrored him. It ends with us hunting something far more dangerous. Outside, the forest stirred, not with wind, but with movement. Because somewhere beyond their territory, someone had just lost their inside source, and they were about to accelerate. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 26. The Summit. The Crimson Veil Summit was not held in secrecy. That was the first warning. It took place at a neutral mountain retreat used for interpact diplomacy. Modern lodge architecture, carved into stone, glass walls overlooking miles of wilderness. Not hidden, not ancient, intentional visibility. George noticed it immediately as their convoy approached. They want witnesses, he said. Peter nodded once. They think legitimacy protects them. Catalina watched the gathered wolves outside the structure. Multiple packs had arrived already. This was larger than a negotiation. This was a political stage, and Crimson Veil planned to control the narrative. Inside, the hall was arranged like a council chamber. Tiered seating, central floor, raised platform. At the far end stood Alpha Rowan Cade of Crimson Veil. He smiled when they entered. Not nervous, expectant. Silvercrest, Northern Ridge. Welcome. No hostility in his tone, which made it worse. George remained at Catalina's right, Peter at her left. The triad walked forward together, perfectly synchronized. The room felt it. The bond was no longer rumor, it was presence. Murmurs rippled through the gathered packs. Rowan's eyes lingered on Catalina. So it's true, he said quietly. A dual-bonded Luna. Catalina didn't react. You arranged a kidnapping, Peter said flatly. Several heads turned. Good. Rowan sighed. You misunderstand. George's voice dropped. Then clarify carefully. Rowan spread his hands. The humans are not experimenting blindly. They are responding. Responding to what? Catalina asked. Rowan's smile faded. To extinction. Silence fell. He gestured toward a screen behind him. Footage appeared. Not the ceremony. Not Helix. Satellite imagery. Migration maps. Missing wolf territories across other continents. Empty lands. Destroyed packs. Entire bloodlines gone, Rowan said. Not hunted. Removed. The room shifted uneasily. They are preparing for war, Rowan continued. And they are losing. Peter's eyes narrowed. You cooperated with them. I negotiated, Rowan corrected. They needed blood samples to understand our biology. In exchange, they shared intelligence. George's control thinned. You traded wolves for information. I traded a few, Rowan said calmly, to save the species. The room erupted in argument. Catalina didn't raise her voice. She stepped forward. Then explain why you targeted my pack. Rowan looked directly at her. Because you're not normal. Stillness. The triad bond, he said. It isn't just rare, it's stabilizing. Human analysts believe your blood carries a regulating factor. You aren't just a Luna. He paused. You may be the evolutionary anchor of our kind. The bond between George, Peter, and Catalina pulsed hard, and several alphas in the chamber suddenly looked at her differently. Not politically, biologically. That was far more dangerous. Peter stepped slightly in front of her. Careful. Rowan's gaze sharpened. If we don't understand why she exists, we all die. George's voice was ice. You don't experiment on family. Rowan answered quietly. They already are. Then Catalina spoke the words that froze the chamber. You worked with the faction that wants to take me. Rowan didn't deny it. I tried to control them. You helped them calibrate, she corrected. Silence. Then she finished. And you're no longer fit to lead wolves. Gasps. Peter's eyes flicked to her. George understood instantly. This was no longer a summit. It was a deposition. Catalina turned to the council. I present testimony. Doors opened behind them. Nyla was escorted in under guard. The room erupted. Rowan's confidence cracked for the first time. And Catalina said calmly, Let's discuss betrayal. All of it. Chapter 27. Judgment. The hall did not quiet immediately. It fractured. Voices rose across the chamber as Nyla was escorted forward between two guards. Some wolves recognized her immediately. Silvercrest Gamma, trusted strategist, Catalina's shadow for years, now a traitor. Rowan Cade stopped smiling. You bring internal pack matters to a council summit? He said. That is not protocol. George answered before Catalina could. Kidnapping a beta and aiding human capture programs isn't protocol either. Murmurs intensified. Peter's gaze stayed on Rowan, but his attention remained half on Nyla. Not anger, not softness. Calculation. Hurt buried under command. Catalina stepped into the center of the chamber floor. Speak, she told Nyla. No titles, no comfort. Nyla stood straight despite the guard's grip. I gave patrol patterns to Crimson Veil, she said clearly. The reaction was immediate. Growls, disbelief, fury. But she continued. I believed a third faction was preparing to hunt Luna specifically. I chose controlled contact to gather intelligence before they found us first. Rowan scoffed softly. You see? Even her own Gamma knew the threat. Catalina cut him off. You did not gather intelligence, she said quietly. You traded wolves. The room stilled again. Nyla lowered her eyes. Yes. Peter's jaw tightened. George did not look away from her. Catalina walked closer until she stood directly in front of Nyla. Did you intend for Victor to be taken? No. Did you know it could happen? A pause. Yes. That landed harder than any confession. The bond between Catalina and her alphas tremored. Not breaking, but strained by grief rather than anger. Catalina turned to the gathered alphas. In our law, betrayal of the pack is death. Several nodded. Rowan folded his arms, satisfied. He thought he understood where this was going. Catalina looked back at Nyla. You loved this pack. Yes. You tried to protect it. Yes. You chose secrecy instead of trust. Nyla's voice dropped. Yes. Catalina stood silent for a moment. Then she spoke. "I will not execute you." The entire hall froze. Peter's head lifted sharply. George studied her carefully. Rowan laughed once. "Mercy? Weakness dressed as virtue." Catalina's gaze snapped to him, and the laughter died instantly. "This is not mercy." She turned back to Nyla. "You are stripped of rank. You will never command again. You will never hold strategy or authority." Nyla swallowed. "You will live as Omega." Shock rippled through the wolves, deeper than if she had ordered death. Because death ends shame, living with it does not. "You will serve the pack you endangered," Catalina continued calmly. "You will heal wolves you once directed. You will stand at the lowest rank and earn trust day by day, or never earn it at all." Nyla's eyes filled for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered. Peter finally spoke. "This isn't forgiveness." "No," Catalina said softly. "It's responsibility." George stepped beside her. "And if you betray us again," he added quietly, "there will not be a second judgment." Nyla bowed her head. The guards led her away. No one in the chamber spoke for several seconds, because they understood what had just happened. Catalina hadn't acted like a ruler. She acted like law, and that frightened Rowan Cade far more than execution would have. Chapter 28. The Reckoning. The chamber did not settle after Nyla left. It shifted. The anger that had filled the room no longer pointed inward. It turned toward Rowan Cade. The Crimson Veil Alpha stood still on the platform, but for the first time since they had entered, he was no longer in control of the room. An older Alpha from the Western Territories spoke first. "You admitted cooperation with humans." Another voice followed. "You allowed wolves to be taken." A third. "You hid extinction data from the Council." The murmurs grew heavier. Rowan lifted his chin. "I prevented panic. If I revealed disappearing bloodlines without proof of the enemy, packs would scatter and expose themselves." George stepped forward. "You didn't protect wolves," he said calmly. "You managed outcomes." Peter's voice was colder. "You gambled with lives that were not yours to risk." Rowan's eyes hardened. "I did what leadership requires, decisions beyond comfort." Catalina walked forward until she stood below the raised platform. "No," she said quietly. The room stilled. "Leadership requires accountability." Rowan looked down at her. "You have no authority over my pack." "I don't need it," she replied. She turned. Not to him, but to the gathered alphas. "You all heard his admission. He authorized contact. He exchanged wolves for intelligence. He enabled human capture attempts. No embellishment, just facts." Silence pressed into the chamber. Then Helena, elder of Silvercrest, stood. "By interpack accord, an alpha who endangers multiple territories may be challenged for fitness to lead." Rowan's attention snapped to her. "That clause requires a formal accusation." Peter stepped beside Catalina. "You have one." George joined them. "And witnesses." The political meaning landed instantly. This was not a duel. This was deposition. Rowan's control cracked at the edges. "You would destabilize an entire territory?" he demanded. Catalina held his gaze. "You already did." An alpha from the Northern Territories rose slowly. "My borders lost a scouting line 2 winters ago. We assumed rogues." Another followed. "My hunters vanished last spring." Another. "Mine as well." The realization spread across the chamber. Not panic, but cold recognition. The disappearances weren't isolated. They were patterned, and Rowan had known. The council elder stepped forward. "Until investigation concludes, Alpha Rowan Cade is suspended from interpack authority." Gasps. Not stripped of pack leadership, yet, but no alliances, no trade authority, no council vote, political isolation. Rowan's jaw tightened. "You weaken wolves when unity is required." Catalina's voice remained steady. "No, we remove risk so unity can exist." For the first time, Rowan truly looked at her, not as curiosity, not as asset, as threat. "You think this ends with me?" he said quietly. The room felt colder. "You've drawn attention to yourself, Luna." The faction you fear? They now know exactly where to look. Peter stepped forward slightly. Then, they'll find us ready. Rowan's gaze lingered on Catalina. They won't come with soldiers. A beat. They'll come with hunters who already understand what you are. George didn't move. Let them. Rowan gave a faint, humorless smile. You still believe this is a political war? His eyes settled on Catalina. It isn't. He was escorted out under council guard, and as the doors closed behind him, Catalina felt the bond between her and the Alpha's pulse, not in comfort, in warning. Because Rowan hadn't sounded defensive, he had sounded certain. Chapter 29. The Hunt. They didn't attack the summit. That would have been predictable. They waited until the packs relaxed. The convoy had already descended from the mountain roads. Night settled over the outskirts of the city, lights glowing below the tree line as Silvercrest territory approached. Inside the lead vehicle, Catalina felt it first, not through scent, through the bond. A pressure, not fear, instinct. Her wolf rose inside her with sudden alertness. Predator. Peter stiffened at the same time. George's hand tightened on the steering wheel. You feel that? George said quietly. Yes, Peter answered. Catalina turned toward the trees rushing past the road. We're being watched. No sooner had the words left her, the world exploded. The rear escort SUV flipped sideways as something struck its front axle with impossible force. The convoy skidded. Tires screamed. The lead vehicle jerked to a halt across the narrow road. Not explosives. Precision. George was already out of the vehicle before it fully stopped. Peter followed. Catalina stepped out last. The forest was silent. No engines, no gunfire, no human scent. Then a figure stepped onto the road. Alone. Tall. Lean. Dressed in dark tactical gear, without insignia. Not armored, not afraid. His eyes reflected the headlights. Silver. Peter's wolf surged violently. Not human, he said low. Another shape moved between the trees. Then another. 4 of them. They did not rush. They circled. Hunters. One of them spoke calmly. Confirm visual identification. The first man studied Catalina. Target confirmed. Primary subject located. George moved slightly in front of her. Wrong territory. The hunter tilted his head. You misunderstand. Territory is irrelevant. He drew a weapon. Not a rifle. A spear-like device humming faintly with energy. Catalina's wolf snarled inside her mind. They weren't guessing. They knew. Peter stepped beside George. You've hunted us before, he said. The man didn't deny it. For generations. The air changed. Not scientists. Not soldiers. Specialists. The hunter's gaze remained fixed on Catalina. You are the anomaly. Another hunter moved closer through the trees. Orders are capture if viable. Termination if necessary. George's voice went deadly quiet. You're leaving neither. The hunter almost smiled. We'll see. He moved first. Impossibly fast. Not wolf speed. Something trained to counter wolf speed. George shifted instantly, bones snapping into massive pale wolf form. Peter followed, darker fur flashing under the headlights. The hunters did not panic. They adapted. The spear weapon discharged, a net of glowing filaments that wrapped around George mid-lunge and slammed him into the asphalt. Catalina's breath caught. Peter struck the attacker from the side, sending him skidding into the trees. But a second hunter intercepted, striking with a shock baton that forced Peter back with a pained snarl. They knew exactly where to hit, exactly how hard. They had done this before. Catalina stepped forward. Stop. Everything paused for half a second. The lead hunter watched her carefully. You will come with us, he said. Peter struggled against 2 opponents, bleeding but standing. George tore partially free of the netting, growling. No, Catalina said calmly. The hunter adjusted his weapon. Non-compliance confirmed. The bond flared violently, and Catalina finally let go. She shifted. Not like before, not explosive, not uncontrolled. The transformation rolled over her like liquid silver, larger than her usual wolf form, brighter under the headlights. The hunters actually hesitated. For the first time, the air vibrated. Peter felt it through the bond immediately. George did too. Strength surged back into them. Not healing, not adrenaline. Amplification. The lead hunter's voice sharpened. New classification. She enhances them. Now they understood why she mattered. Catalina stepped forward, her voice no longer human but carried through the bond and the night. You came to hunt wolves. Her eyes burned. You found a pack. George broke the netting. Peter moved beside her. 3 aligned. The hunters recalculated. Then the lead one gave a quiet order. Withdraw. No panic. No defeat. Just decision. Smoke charges detonated across the road, blinding the area in seconds. By the time it cleared, they were gone. No bodies, no vehicles, no sound. Only deep claw marks in the asphalt, and the lingering scent of something ancient and wrong. Peter shifted back first, breathing hard. They weren't testing. George scanned the tree line. They were confirming. Catalina looked into the dark forest. They know exactly what I am now. The bond pulsed. Not fear. Inevitable approach. And she said quietly, this wasn't the attack. Peter's gaze hardened. This was the introduction. Chapter 30. Blood Remembers. The estate was awake, but the private wing was dim. Most of the pack believed their Luna was resting. She wasn't. Catalina sat curled into the corner of the long sectional couch, a blanket around her shoulders she didn't remember someone placing there. The lights were low, only the city glow filtering through the glass walls. She hadn't shaken since the road, until now. Her hands trembled faintly in her lap. Peter sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders, steady and warm. She leaned into him without thinking, her head resting against his chest. His breathing was slow on purpose, grounding her, letting her body match his rhythm. You're safe, he murmured quietly. She nodded, but her voice came out small. They knew exactly where to hit George. Peter's jaw tightened slightly, but his hand moved gently along her arm, soothing. They've done it before, he said softly. That's what scares me, she whispered. Across the room, George stood near the window watching the tree line, but his attention wasn't on the forest. It was on her. Every few seconds his gaze returned, checking her breathing, her posture, the bond. I should have sensed them sooner, he said tightly. Catalina shook her head immediately. No. Her fingers curled lightly into Peter's shirt. They weren't hunting like rogues, they were hunting us. Silence stretched. Peter pressed a brief kiss against her hair. They won't take you. She exhaled slowly, trying to believe it. For the first time since the bond formed, the strength between the 3 of them hadn't felt like power. It felt like a target. I didn't panic on the road, she admitted quietly. I panicked after. George finally crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. You held the line, he said gently. Her eyes lifted to his. I almost lost you both. The bond pulsed, soft, reassuring. George squeezed her hands. But you didn't, and you won't. Peter's arm tightened around her slightly, anchoring her between them. And for a moment, they didn't talk strategy. They didn't talk war. They just stayed there, breathing together, letting the adrenaline leave her system. Then, the lights flickered. All 3 went still. Not power failure. Pressure. George stood immediately. Peter shifted slightly in front of Catalina without releasing her. She felt it again. That strange pull behind her ribs. Not the mate bond. Something older. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate strikes against the inner estate door. No guard had announced anyone. No alarm had triggered. George and Peter exchanged a look. Catalina pushed herself to her feet. I know, she said quietly. And she didn't know how she knew. But she did. George moved first. Peter followed. Catalina walked behind them. When the door opened, an elderly woman stood there, alone, no vehicle in sight, no scent of fear. Her silver hair was braided tightly against her skull, her posture straight, her eyes ancient, not weak, not fading, ancient. Peter inhaled sharply. I don't recognize her scent. George shook his head slightly. She crossed our perimeter without triggering alarms. The woman's gaze settled directly on Catalina. There you are, she said softly. The bond inside Catalina reacted, not with alarm, with recognition. Who are you? George demanded. The woman didn't look at him. You carry it fully, she murmured to Catalina. All 3 strands. Peter's jaw tightened. What strands? The woman finally looked at the 2 alphas. You thought this was rare? She asked calmly. Dual bonding, amplification, stabilization. She shook her head slightly. This isn't rare. She stepped forward without permission. It is dormant. The air felt heavier. Catalina's pulse slowed, not with fear, with clarity. You're from another pack, she said. The woman smiled faintly. Not a pack, a beat, a lineage. Silence settled. I am of the Aether line, the woman said. The first blood that learned to bind more than one alpha without collapse. George's expression shifted. Impossible. Yes, the woman replied calmly. That's what they said last time. Peter's voice lowered. What do you want? The woman looked back at Catalina. You were supposed to stay myth. The words landed heavily. But they've started hunting again. Catalina felt it. A flicker of memory that wasn't hers. An echo of wolves standing against something older than governments. They aren't new, the woman continued quietly. Those hunters. George's eyes sharpened. You've seen them before. Yes. The woman's voice lost its softness. They nearly erased us. Silence wrapped around the room. Peter's jaw flexed. And you're only coming now? The woman's gaze flicked briefly to him. We do not intervene unless the blood fully awakens. She turned back to Catalina. It has. The bond between the 3 flared. But this time, something beneath it pulsed. Broader, older, Catalina felt her wolf shift subtly under her skin, not changing, expanding. The woman stepped closer. They will not stop with testing. They will not stop with capture. A pause. They are trying to eliminate the stabilizing bloodlines first. George's voice was controlled steel. And how many of you are left? The woman held Catalina's gaze. After tonight? A long silence. 2. The weight of that pressed into the room. Peter exhaled slowly. So this isn't a political war. No, the woman replied. It's extinction. Catalina lifted her chin. Then why did you come? The woman's eyes sharpened. To see if you are strong enough to survive what's coming. Outside, the forest shifted with distant wind. Or movement. Hard to tell. The woman stepped back toward the door. They will return soon. Stronger. She paused. And when they do, you must choose. George stepped forward. Choose what? The woman's gaze remained on Catalina. Whether to protect your packs, her voice lowered, or awaken the rest of your blood. She turned and walked into the darkness beyond the estate lights. No escort, no hesitation. Gone. Silence filled the doorway. Peter shut the door slowly. George looked at Catalina. 2, he said quietly. She nodded. The bond between them pulsed steady. Not broken, not afraid, but no longer just a triad. Something else stirred beneath it. Something older. And somewhere in the forest beyond their territory, silver-eyed hunters recalibrated their mission. Book 1 ends not with victory, but with revelation. They weren't fighting to survive as a pack. They were fighting to preserve a bloodline. And now, the bloodline had awakened. And that brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for listening all the way through. We hope this audiobook kept you entertained and left you wanting more. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what kind of stories you'd like to hear next. There are plenty more full audiobooks waiting for you here, so be sure to check out the channel for your next great listen. Until next time, happy listening.